The toughest hurdle is really making our product, our models, our conversations all aligned to this bar of what we expect of ourselves, which is at or near perfection on our extraction and form filling.
Yeah. Hi, folks. Welcome back to On Call with Insignia. We're here with none other than Tim Prugar, who leads engineering and product at fileAI. And you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think
Right.
like, it's great that the customers are letting you guys know. I remember a conversation with another like product CPO, and she said the best customer to have is the one who complains. So it's always good to have
Absolutely.
the
Yep.
feedback. Yeah, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and move from fileAI to also talk about you as a product leader. You mentioned you've worked in a couple of AI companies before
Yep.
this, and so it's not your first rodeo. But is there anything? I guess the obvious question is like, what sets fileAI apart from the past AI adventures you've had? But maybe also, is there anything that you've been bringing into fileAI from these past experiences as well?
Absolutely. I think so. I had the privilege of working at Nextcaller, which was a YC 14 company, which was then acquired by Pindrop Security, which was an Andreessen portfolio company. IVP just crossed 100 million ARR. And so seen joined one of the seed stage, joined one post Series D, and now joining FileAI. And I think what I bring from that is a few things. One, I've seen firsthand what happens when you listen to engineers and let them build. I think FileAI is a deep tech company that deeply trusts the engineering team and the product team. And that's something I've tried to bring from my previous experience to amplify and grow. I think another thing is just comfort with the growing pains of a scale up. Having been in a startup, having been in a scale up, now at a scale up at FileAI, there are inevitable pitfalls and mistakes you step in and great opportunities you recognize and run to. And so I think my experience of bringing to File AI an excitement for what's happening, that when delivery teams feel stressed because we're delivering on 10 enterprise deals at once, that's really exciting. That's a place you want to be. You don't want to be bored wondering if a deal is going to come in. You want to be figuring out how to make it work and how to deliver a truly exceptional customer experience. And then I think the third is just being unapologetically bold about putting new technologies into production. At Nextcaller, we did it with USS SageMaker. At Pindrop, it was probably the most intense research institution I've ever worked in, and the way that new models were productized and put into production. And then here at FileAI, of the velocity with which generative AI in general is working, but the demand that senior management and frankly the engineering team has for let's test this, let's try this, let's roll it out, let's make that customer experience better, because you cannot wait in this environment. You need to move fast, you need to move definitively, and you need to learn really quickly. So I think those are the things that I bring from my previous experience. And also, frankly, this works too hard not to have fun. I enjoy working with people who are kind, collaborative, fun, funny, and have a high bar for excellence. And I've been really fortunate to have that at three straight places, with File AI being the present.
Mhm. And yeah, speaking of going from what you've taken from your past experiences, is there anything new as you joined FileAI that you've discovered, especially working in Singapore, the different geographies, yeah, culture, whatnot? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the talent here in Singapore is exceptional. Incredibly fortunate with the team that I have, both that I inherited and was fortunate enough to find and build and hire. I think the biggest adjustment for me was just navigating the different regulatory, privacy, technology landscapes in your backyard. You could probably tell I come from the United States. I grew up in Kentucky. I'm used to my neighbors being Indiana, Tennessee, and Ohio. Here, my neighbors are Malaysia, Indonesia, and Thailand, which is completely different countries. And so just thinking about that as a product and an engineering leader, of it's one extra layer of complexity when you're thinking about how and what you build. Is what are the regulations of the places you're shipping? What are the microservices available? What does your deployment model need to look like? And honestly, the amount that I've been able to learn, and that I have a very gracious and compassionate team that they've been teaching me as well, has been just a massive career development for me. And I think one of the things that I've learned most stepping into this role.
Yeah, you brought up a good point actually about, I guess it also adds to the whole mode of File AI as well,
Mhm.
having been able to navigate all of these differences. Maybe just for our audience, can you give like an example of how like the differences in kind of perhaps regulation or how people like view data privacy and all that have
Oh
affected
yeah,
the product?
absolutely. So United States, you have an absolutely massive market, no federal data privacy laws, particularly. You have localized, like state-based laws that you have to comply with, like CCPA. Here you have PDPA in Singapore. You have MAS's and IMDA's trusted AI framework, which is guidance that you're expected to abide by. In Indonesia, you have different cloud services that are and are not present, really strong data residency and data privacy rules, working through the OJK there. Australia, extremely strong AI data privacy laws, working in Japan, expectations there. So you really have to think through all of this of one, am I being authentically an excellent, highly secure steward of data? We're SOC 2 Type 2, ISO 2700. We're actually going above and beyond what is expected of companies at our stage by getting ISO 42001 as well as SOC 1 Type 2 in our next audit cycle, which is happening currently. So thinking through how does data privacy, how does privacy by design, how do regulatory considerations not come up as things you're trying to comply with after the fact, but that are fundamentally built into the DNA of how you build your products and how your team thinks about meeting customer needs.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I think that's pretty interesting. I like how you were like a steward of data. And normally, I think in tech space, I think the business model of being like a asset light platform and not really having being like low touch
Mhm.
is pretty predominant. But at the same time, I think it's always good for companies to, as they mature, have greater ownership and responsibility over the things that happen on their platform and data included. I wanted to get into I guess, a fun question. I think one thing I've learned
I
from
thought they were all fun so far.
okay, that's good to know. Yeah, a little bit outside of work, so to speak. But you in your career previously, you weren't always in AI, you weren't always in software. You were previously also in education. I think you mentioned that like a wrestling coach as well. And I guess for entrepreneurs, tech leaders, I think the folks spoken to on this podcast in the past have often cited kind of athletes as sources of inspiration where they learn from in terms of leadership and all of this. Yeah, maybe you can share a little bit about how that whole experience as a wrestling coach plus has impacted the way that you
No,
manage engineers and sales and all that. Yeah.
No, absolutely. I wrestled my whole life, had a massive impact on me as a person and a leader. I don't know, based on my record in college, if you call me an athlete, I certainly was a participant. No, I was very fortunate to work at a number of schools and with a number of absolutely exceptional educators. I think one of the things that I bring from my life in education and coaching to my work is there's this great book, Teaching is Leadership.
Mm,
And it's the idea that there are so many external factors working against classroom teachers. And one can either dwell on those or realize that you are the ultimate owner and leader of the four walls of your classroom. And I carry that over to the startup world where there are so many reasons why you should fail. There are way more headwinds than tailwinds. There are naysayers, there are changing funding environments. There's always a problem. And so, what you can focus on is your locus of control and focus on being a leader within your organization. I think that's really important. Working with middle schoolers, high velocity decision making very important when you're dealing with problems all day, every day. You have about 3 minutes to solve one, or another one's coming. And I actually think startup life's similar. The more that you hem and haw, the more those decisions pile up,
mm,
and you need to rightly or wrongly move quickly. Also, working with middle schoolers, you get very accustomed to being told you're wrong. So that pretty much happened all day, every day when I was a teacher. And I think listening to what people are saying when they're giving you feedback and what are they trying to understand, what are they experiencing, and how do you infuse that into your practice. So I think that's one of the places where, whether it was listening to teachers about the best way to run things or students about the best way to run things, it's why I now listen to engineers and salespeople, and I really take that feedback and that advice. And also, there's no substitute for humor. You can make someone's day or break someone's day by how you respond to them and interact with them. And it doesn't matter if they're a 50-year-old hardcore COBOL engineer or a 12-year-old wrestler. It's the same mindset and the same thing. But that's a lot of what I've taken. It factors in quite a bit. And I think I am an educator at heart, which means I'm always learning, frequently wrong. And I listen really well. And every once in a while, I get it right. So that's what I bring to File AI from my
mm.
time as a teacher and a coach.
No, the way you describe middle schoolers doesn't sound too different from your typical VC, I guess. Uh,
That's your joke, not mine.
yeah, I think I'm a little bit safe to say that. Working at a VC. But yeah, no, that's pretty interesting. I haven't really encountered that many people who have come from that background and move into to software or tech. So it's very interesting to see how you've translated a lot of the mindset, especially. And before we wrap up our conversation, I always like to ask our guests about a make or break moment in their career and what they've learned from that, like anything do or die, maybe not literally life or death, but a really pivotal moment from your career that maybe our listeners, especially those who are working at startups, could learn from.
Yeah, it wasn't life or death, but it was life or death for the company. So I was at Next Caller in 2017, 2018, and we had this product that was doing solid ARR, but we were noticing problems. The margins weren't great. Our customer base, we didn't really have an ICP. None of our sales seemed replicable. And we had this other product on the side that was high margin, low revenue, but being used by a major bank. And I think about this moment a lot because I think it was some of the most courage I've seen from a leader, the CEO at the time, Ian Roncaroni, when we were talking through what do we do. Had we stayed the course with the high revenue product, we would have plateaued. The company would not have become what it did. And if we took a risk and focused on the high margin, replicable use case enterprise product, we had a chance at being a rocket ship. And in talking about risk, I think Ian correctly sussed out the risk isn't staying the course. Like the risk isn't changing course. The risk is not changing course. This is the clear answer. The data shows it, the opportunity shows it, the upside shows it. And I think having the courage to actually end of life that one product to focus 100% of company resources on the other. In the following year, we 6x'd revenue and we doubled it year over year after that until we were acquired. So to me, it was absolutely the right decision. And the amount of courage, who knows the number of behind the scenes investor conversations that had to happen. But
Right.
that idea of the sometimes pivoting, changing course, making a bold decision, that actually isn't the risk. The risk is staying the course, pretending everything's fine when things clearly aren't.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and hindsight's 2020, but obviously not knowing any of what you guys achieved afterwards is certainly daunting, to say the least. I know. On that note, hopefully for those who are listening, you guys can get inspired by that story, and maybe not as big of a decision, but even in the smaller details, find some courage there. On that note, yeah, thanks so much, Tim, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Quite the discussion. And for those who are interested to learn more about File AI, 6 letters, file.ai, type it in browser. You'll be able to test out the platform. And by the time this podcast is out, you guys should be able to try out MCP as well. As Tim has mentioned, don't be afraid to leave comments and feedback. I'm sure they'll
Please,
take it,
please.
whether it's on our platform or theirs. And yeah, hopefully get to have you or more leaders from FileAI on the show in the episodes to come.
We're chock full of leaders. I'm sure you will.
Thanks so much, Tim. And
Thank you. Appreciate it.